Guten Erev Shabbos. How are you, my holy sisters and brothers? We are getting ready for Shabbos here. It's Friday afternoon. Let's light up the darkness. We're going to waste no time today. This is a makeup show. We missed 2 previous days because of Erev Yom Kippur and Yom Kippur, and there was so much to do. I hope you had a beautiful and elevating Yom Kippur if you celebrated Yom Kippur. And now it is Friday, so we're going to do 3 pages today, covering 3 pages. There's a lot to do, and there's some beautiful material on these 3 pages. Who is with us today as we get it going on a Friday afternoon and looking forward to a beautiful Shabbos with God's help? Gwen in Michigan, Yehuda in South Carolina, Paula in Chicago, Christo in Lubbock, PK in Colorado, Nancy in North Carolina, Tom. Where do you tune in from, Tom? I can't remember right now. Hannah in New York. Over there on the YouTube side, nobody with us yet. Okay. I'm going to just mention something quickly that's going to come up today, right? So whenever we say the prayer, as our sages say, we normally call it the Amidah, the standing prayer, or sometimes called the Shmona Esrei, the 18, because of the 18 blessings that are included in it, which later the sages made 19. But this is the central prayer of every prayer service, right? And that's why it's called the prayer. And the idea is that it replaced the sacrifices that were offered when the temple was standing. On a weekday, a regular weekday, so we say all 19 of these blessings. But the structure is the thing to note here. We always begin with 3 blessings of praise, and we end with 3 blessings of thanksgiving. And then on a normal day, in between, there are 13 blessings that are also supplications, right? God who grants us, for example, God who rewards the righteous, God who punishes the wicked, God who will send us a Messiah, God who hears prayer, etc. On Shabbos, so we don't include those middle 13 supplications because it's considered inappropriate to be asking God for the stuff that we need on Shabbos. Rather, the middle 13 are all condensed into one, which is really just blessing God, praising God, and thanks at the same time for giving us Shabbos, right? So it's 7 blessings on Shabbos when we say the Amidah, morning, evening, morning, and afternoon. Now, what happens when that Shabbos coincides with a festival? That's a question that we're going to be addressing today in our daf. So I'm just going to read to you. Okay, so this is the Shachrit Amidah for Shabbos. Shachrit is the morning service. So on Shabbos morning, a regular Shabbos, we're going to have these 7 blessings. First 3 blessings of praise. We're going to end with 3 blessings of thanksgiving. And I'm going to just show you the basic structure of that and then what the middle blessing is all about. So without reading the whole Amidah, we would start by blessing God for selecting our patriarchs to be our patriarchs. And that first blessing begins with, blessed are you, Lord our God, and God of our fathers, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob. And that blessing ends, blessed are you, Lord, shield of Abraham. That's the first blessing. The second blessing is about the divine might, right? And it says, you are eternally mighty, Lord. You give life to the dead, right? That's the ultimate power. None of us have that power to give life to the dead. God has that, and so that blessing ends. Blessed are you, Lord, who revives the dead. That's the second blessing. The third blessing is about God's holiness. You are holy, and your name is holy, and that blessing ends. Blessed are you, Lord, the holy God. Those are the first 3 blessings of praise. Then comes the middle, right, which is going to be about the holiness of the day. And so on a regular Shabbos, we would say, Moses rejoiced at the gift of his portion when you called him faithful servant, a crown of glory you placed on his head. When he stood before you on Mount Sinai, he brought down in his hands 2 tablets of stone on which was engraved the observance of the Sabbath, right? So Shabbos observance is one of the 10 commandments. It's, up there. It's right at the top. The very first commandment, of course, is to recognize God as God. But Shabbos comes very quickly thereafter. It's, I think, the 4th of the 10 commandments. It's on that first tablet that establishes the obligations of humans, of Jews, to God. Okay, as opposed to the second tablet, which is all about our obligations to each other, humans and humans. So that middle blessing continues, and then so it is written in your Torah, the children of Israel must keep the Sabbath, and it explains more about the Sabbath, and then that blessing, that section ends with, blessed are you, Lord, who sanctifies the Sabbath. Now, then comes the last 3 blessings that we say every day, just like the first 3 and the last 3 we say every day, whether it's Shabbos, weekday, whatever. So on Shabbos, we would then go to the temple service, find favor, Lord our God, in your people Israel, and heed their prayer. Restore the service to your most holy house, and accept soon in love and favor. So we're actually thanking God for giving us the temple service. Since we can't observe it because we don't have a temple, we're saying, please restore the temple, just so that we can give thanks properly the way you taught us in the Torah, that we would thank you with offerings in the temple. And so we ask him to restore the temple, and that's why it finishes, blessed are you, Lord, who restores his presence to Zion, and still included in the blessings of thanksgiving. Then comes the actual thanksgiving, kind of a general thanks. It's not general because we specifically say all the things that we thank God for. We give thanks to you, for you are the Lord our God, the God of our ancestors. You are the rock of our lives, the shield of our salvation from generation to generation. We will thank you and declare your praise for our lives, for our souls, for your miracles, for your wonders and favors. You are good, you are compassionate, your loving kindnesses never cease. We always place our hope in you. And then we finish that section, blessed are you, Lord, whose name is the good, and to whom thanks are due. And then the final blessing that we say every day is blessing God who creates peace, right? We sort of culminate the Amidah always by blessing God for creating peace. We try to emulate God and be like Moses' brother Aaron in creating peace, but it's very difficult to create peace. It's one of the hardest and most laudable things is to create peace. God is the master of creating peace, and we thank him for creating all the peace that exists in the world. Now, what happens when Shabbos coincides with a festival? That's actually a 2-part question because, for example, we have Sukkot coming up next week, right? We're going to begin Sukkot, I think, Monday night, and then the first 2 days of the holiday, which are full Yomtov days, full festival days, because we live outside of Israel, is going to be Tuesday and Wednesday. So those are full festival days. Then, after the first 2 days, or after the first day in Israel, where they only celebrate 1 day Yom Tov, then come the intermediate days of the festival. And we have that for both Sukkot in the fall and Passover in the spring, where we have the intermediate days, right? So, if we're talking about the morning Amidah on Shabbos, and like this year, we're going to have an intermediate day of Sukkot that's going to fall out during, on Shabbos, right? On Shabbos, it's going to be an intermediate day of Sukkot, not one of the full festival days of Sukkot, like at the beginning or the end. Okay, so on that day, what are we going to do? During the final blessings of Thanksgiving, right? And we said that the first of those, after the holiness of the day, which is that middle blessing that we add for Shabbat and substitutes for the 13 normal blessings of the weekdays, then the next one is the first of the blessings of Thanksgiving, the temple service, right? And we're saying to God, thank you for sending us the temple. please send it back again so that we can start to give offerings like, you told us to in the Torah and we would like to do. So what happens when it's Hol HaMoed, intermediate days of the festival? Then we're going to insert language about that, and we're going to say in the middle of the temple service blessing, our God and God of our ancestors, may their rise, come, reach, appear, be favored, heard, regarded, and remembered before you, our recollection and remembrance, as well as the remembrance of our ancestors, and of the Messiah, the Son of David, your servant, and of Jerusalem, your holy city, and all your people, the house of Israel, for deliverance and well-being, grace, loving kindness and compassion, life and peace, on this day of the festival of Sukkot. On it, remember us, Lord our God, for good. And so that, and then a few more things that we ask him to remember us for. And that's all part of the first of those final three blessings, the blessings of Thanksgiving. And that is how we note, right, in the Amidah, that we're in one of the intermediate days, sacred because it's part of Sukkot, but not a full day of the festival, not Yomtov. And that's how we mark it when an intermediate day coincides with Shabbos. That's what's going to happen this year. What happens when one of the full festival days, the first 2 days of Sukkot outside Israel, coincides with Shabbos? Right? So now it's a full Yom Tov and Shabbos falling on the same day. In that case, we don't say this Amidah, the regular Saturday morning Amidah. Instead, we would say the Shachrit Amidah for Yom Tov, the festival Amidah. And we're going to have additions because it falls on Shabbos. Now, in that case, and that's what we're going to be discussing carefully in today's daf, in our page of Talmud, when the festival and Shabbos coincide, it's still going to be that same formula: 3 blessings of praise in the beginning, 3 blessings of thanksgiving at the end, and a middle blessing about the holiness of the day. However, here the holiness of the day is the festival, but when it coincides with Shabbos, we're going to mention Shabbos first, right? So in that case, where is it? So for the holiness of the day, right? So we would say, and you, Lord our God, have given us in love Sabbaths for rest and festivals for rejoicing, holy days and seasons for joy, this Sabbath day and this day of the festival of Sukkot, our time of rejoicing. We say some more about the festival and festivals in general. And then we finish that section about the holiness of the day with the final blessing. Blessed are you, Lord, who sanctifies the Sabbath, Israel, and the festive seasons. Now, this is a special Amidah that we say on festival days. And that blessing in the middle is specifically tailored to address God and praise him and thank him and bless him for giving us that festival day. So then the question is, why do we mention the festival day last in the blessing that ends that section of the Amidah? First we say, bless God for sanctifying the Sabbath, and then for sanctifying Israel, the people of Israel, and lastly, for sanctifying the festive seasons, meaning that day of the festival. Why in that order? And we're going to find out when we get to it in today's reading. That's where we're headed. Okay. Where are we holding? We are going to be covering, we're in Tractate Beitzah. This is the 8th volume of the Talmud, the laws of festivals. We're going to be completing chapter 1 and opening chapter 2 today as we cover pages 15 through 17. All right, so it's going to be 3 pages. We're going to do highlights of 3 pages today. So we open near the top of page 15 on the A side. The Mishna taught, and here we're finishing up chapter 1, and which is generally talking about what happens when something comes into being during the festival. How do we handle that? That was the egg that was laid on the festival. And then all kinds of related laws came up. And the one that came up here, which is now being discussed in the Gemara, but was mentioned in the 12th Mishnah of chapter 1, is that whether on a festival or on Shabbos, one may not wear a spiked sandal. Right, a spiked sandal is basically like baseball spikes that you get better traction on the ground. But there was an incident in which there was a tragedy and people died on account of a spiked sandal. One may not send a spiked sandal on a festival, right? Why can you not send it? Why can you not carry it through the public domain to send it to someone as a gift? We learned that you can send food and you can even send other items that are related to enjoyment of this festival. So you're going to be able to carry them through the public domain because they're necessary for preparing food. But once you can send items that are necessary to prepare food, you can also send other items as long as they're related to the festival. But a spiked sandal, even though other clothing may be sent, the spiked sandal may not, because it's prohibited on Shabbos and on Yomtov, and therefore it's also going to be prohibited to carry it through the public domain. A spiked sandal, what is the reason that it may not be worn? Why is it prohibited to wear it? And the Gemara answers, it is due to an incident that occurred. A great tragedy resulted when people wore spiked sandals on Shabbos, which led the sages to decree that these sandals may not be worn on Shabbos or a festival. What was that incident? It was during a time of persecution, and a huge number of people were hiding from the bad guys. Was it the Romans? All it says here is that the Jews were hiding from their enemies. So I'm not even sure that they know. Was it the Philistines? Was it the Greeks? Was it the Romans? At any rate, our enemies were persecuting us. And a large number of people hid in a cave. And it's a little unclear exactly what happened. One opinion was, and we encountered this before in our Daf Yomi journey, was that the spiked sandal left a footprint. And it was unclear whether that footprint was coming or going. And somebody saw the footprint and said, our enemies are coming. And it caused a stampede. Another opinion is that the spiked sandal, its nature is to make a certain kind of noise when you step on rocks or gravel or something. And that noise, sort of made the people panic that the enemies are here, the Romans are here, the Greeks, whoever it was. At any rate, the stampede which ensued, and, tragically, we saw there was a stampede, earlier this year by Lag BaOmer, 33 days after Passover. There was that stampede in Meron, and people died. I mean, it was horrific. Right, and so it's the same idea. There was a panic. People stampeded out of the cave, and in that crush of people died. And the sages, to commemorate that event, said, don't wear spiked sandals. They didn't say generally. They said don't wear it on Shabbos and Yomtov. I don't think they said you can never wear a spiked sandal at all. The commemoration was spiked sandals may not be worn on Shabbos or a festival. Abaye said, with regard to a spiked sandal, it is prohibited to wear it on Shabbos, but it is permitted to move it. And he clarifies, it is prohibited to wear a spiked sandal due to the incident that occurred. And it is permitted to move it from the fact that the Mishna teaches one may not send it. You may not send it through the public domain. You may not carry it in the public domain, but apparently you can move it from one place to another in your house, meaning it's not muktzah. For if it enters your mind that it is prohibited even to move a spiked sandal, now consider if it were prohibited to move it, is the Mishnah required to state that one may not send it? Rather, it must certainly be permitted to move a spiked sandal inside the house, despite the fact that one may not wear it. We skip a little. The Mishnah taught that this is the general principle. With regard to any article that one may use on a festival, one may send it. Makes sense? And the Gemara, now, but is that really the distinction? Because what we've been talking about is things that would otherwise be prohibited to do, like carrying items through the public domain. It should be that if you do carry it, it's because, like cooking is related to the needs of the festival. It should be that this thing that you're going to now send, carry, etc., should be related to the festival, not just, may you use it, right? So it's a little unclear. I mean, there are things in my house that are not muktzah. I can pick them up and move them. It's not like a hammer, which is so much related to weekday activities. But let's say a book that has nothing to do with the festival. right? Not a book of Torah, not a book of scripture, not a book of halacha, just some book. Okay, so I'm allowed to use that on the festival. Should I be allowed to carry it through the public domain? And they're going to explore this question a little more. And the Gemara relates, Rav Sheshet permitted the sages to send tefillin on a festival. Why is that a question? So tefillin, you don't wear it on a festival, right? Now, in ancient times, they not only wrap tefillin, so men wrap tefillin every morning by obligation. The Torah says you shall wrap these words as a sign upon your hand and a symbol before your eyes. But we don't do that on Shabbos and Yomtov. Now, in old times, they used to wear it all day long. But just like now that we don't wrap it when we just put it on in the morning during morning prayers, then, likewise, they wouldn't wear it on Shabbos or Yom Tov either. So now that you can't use it on Shabbos and Yom Tov, it actually is a prohibited item on Shabbos and Yom Tov, should be able to carry it through the public domain. Rav Sheshes permitted the sages to send tefillin on a festival. Abaye said to him, but didn't we learn in the Mishna with regard to any article that one may use on a festival, one may send it? Tefillin are not worn on festivals. And the Gemara answers, this is what the Mishna is saying. With regard to any article that one may use on a weekday, one may send it on a festival. And Abaye said, well, with regard to tefillin, since this topic has come before us in the previous discussion, let us say something new about it. If someone was coming on the road on Erev Shabbos, like right now, Friday afternoon, or of the festival, before the festival, the afternoon before the festival, and he had tefillin on his head, because they wore it all day long, as the practice then was to don tefillin the entire day, but not at night. They didn't wear it at night. And the sun set before he arrived at his destination, signaling the beginning of Shabbos or the festival. So when tefillin may not be worn or even moved, right? Then it's muktzah, you don't even move it. You don't touch it on the festival. But now he's wearing it. He's out there in public. What's he going to do with it? It's a holy item. He can't just abandon it. What does he do? So he places his hand upon them to cover them so that people will not see them until he reaches his house, at which point he removes them, right? Because what does it mean? You're hiding it from other people so that they shouldn't see that you're making a transgression because you were negligent? Basically, yeah. So that they shouldn't think that you don't know the law, or so that they shouldn't think that somehow the law changed and they're the ones that are wrong. You made a mistake, but you don't want to sort of flaunt that you made a mistake. You have to get them home, and that's why you're going to continue wearing them, but you're going to cover them up. So to cover them so that people will not see them until he reaches his house, at which point he removes them. If he was sitting in the study hall with tefillin on his head, and the day of Shabbos or festival was sanctified, meaning nightfall came, the day began, Shabbos or festival began, for which he was unprepared, he places his hand upon them until he reaches his house. Same idea. And then, so that is how you handle that situation. And the law is, if one is wearing tefillin while walking along the road or sitting in a study hall outside the city after Shabbos began, he places his hand on them and he walks until he reaches his house. But if there is a house near the city wall, where his tefillin can be safeguarded, he should place them there in accordance with the opinion of Abaye. What happens if you find tefillin on the road and it's Shabbos? That's a sacred object. You shouldn't just leave it sitting there. With regard to one who finds tefillin on Shabbos lying in a spot where they are not safe, if it is a place where it would be dangerous for him to put them on for fear of an anti-Semitic response, he may cover them and leave them there until after Shabbos. If wearing the tefillin does not pose danger, he should put them on in pairs, right? Put on both sets of tefillin, the arm and the head, and transport them to a location where they will be safe. If there are too many of them to move in this manner, like several sets of tefillin were lying there, he should guard them until the conclusion of Shabbos. If he is unable to do this, he should carry them in stages of less than 4 cubits at a time, or in some other manner with which he does not transgress the Torah prohibition against carrying on Shabbos. So that's how you handle that. That's going to conclude our discussion of Chapter 1. Chapter 2 is going to address the Erev Tavshilin. So this is that situation when the Hag, when Yomtov, right, when the festival is adjacent to Shabbos. A typical situation would be, so outside of Israel, it's a 2-day festival. So imagine that the festival falls out in the calendar that it's Thursday and Friday. And then comes Shabbos, right? So the problem is you can cook on a festival, but you can only cook on the festival for the needs of the festival. You can't cook on a festival for what comes after the festival, even if what comes after the festival is Shabbos. And Shabbos is the holiest day of the year, right? And it comes every week. You might argue that Yom Kippur, because it's called the Shabboson, like the Shabbat of Shabbats, is in a sense, it only comes one day a year. It's a day of atonement. It has all kinds of stuff. But we give priority to that which comes more often. And Shabbos comes every week. And God himself sanctified Shabbos before there was a Jewish people. That's going to come into our discussion later. So Shabbos is the most important thing, more important than festivals, even though the festivals come once a year. Nevertheless, you can't cook on a festival day, even though you can cook on a festival day, but you can't cook for what comes after, even if it's Shabbos. But if it's festival Thursday and Friday, how are you going to make Shabbos dinner? Right? I mean, how can you make Shabbos dinner? Are you going to cook it on Wednesday? How good is Shabbos dinner going to be if you cooked it on Wednesday, 3 days before Shabbos? So the sages came up with a solution for this problem. And what you do is you make this Erev Tavshilin, and you use, an article of food, just like an Erev Techumen. We talked about back in Tractate Erevin, about how we can join areas, Sabbath boundaries, so that we can walk the 2,000 cubit limit, but we can sort of move where that limit rests so that we can go 4,000 cubits in one direction. Or an Erev Hatzeros, where we're going to join courtyards so that you can carry, from one courtyard to another, because they're all like one master courtyard. You can even have a neighborhood Erev, or here in LA, a massive citywide Erev, so that we can carry on Shabbos. But you can also join time. Right? You can use an article of food to join units of time. In this case, the festival and Shabbos into one period of holiness vis-a-vis our cooking. We're not going to be able to cook on Shabbos, but by starting to cook the meal of Shabbos and Yom Tov together before Yom Tov begins. So you do this on Wednesday, and there's a special blessing you say. It's in every Jewish prayer book. And now you're going to join the festival and Shabbos into one unit by cooking a little dish and putting that aside. You don't eat it during the festival because it's going to serve to join the festival days and the Sabbath days. And now, because it's all one unit, the cooking that you do on Friday during the festival, it's going to be possible to eat it during Shabbos, right? That Friday night dinner, you will be able to cook it on Friday morning, even though Friday is part of the festival, because you're cooking for the festival and Shabbos all together, right? That's the basic theory of this. Of course, the sages are going to dispute various nuances and specifics of that general principle. Mishnah number 1 here in chapter 2, we're on the B side of page 15. With regard to a festival that occurs on Erev Shabbos, right, like Friday, one may not cook on the festival with the initial intent to cook for Shabbos. However, he may cook on that day for the festival itself, and if he left over any food, he left it over for Shabbos. Right? As long as you were really technically cooking for the festival and you made a lot, well, what's left over can be for Shabbos. Okay, that's one way to handle it. The early sages also instituted an ordinance, the joining of cooked foods, the Erev Tavshilin, which the Mishnah explains. One may prepare a cooked dish designated for Shabbos on Erev Yom Tov, right? Before the festival starts, you start cooking for Shabbos, which comes after the festival, and you may rely on that to cook on the festival for Shabbos. Now, the sages of the Mishnah disagreed with regard to the details of this ordinance. Beis Shammai say, for the purpose of the joining of cooked foods, right, so joining the days into one must prepare 2 cooked dishes, and Beis Hillel say 1 dish is sufficient, And they both agree with regard to a fish and the egg that is fried on it, these are considered two dishes for this purpose. If one ate the food prepared before the festival as an Erev, and none of it remained for Shabbos, or if it was lost, well, then he may not rely on it and cook with the initial intent to cook for Shabbos. But if he left any part of the Erev, he may rely on it to cook for Shabbos. Usually this is done with a hard-boiled egg that you do, let's say on that Wednesday, you're intending it to be for Shabbos, and now you can cook on Friday for that Friday night dinner when it's Shabbos. Now the Gemara. Why is a hard-boiled egg enough? Because we follow Beis Hillel, who said that one dish is enough. Beis Shammai said two dishes. It has to be more of a meal. But we follow Beis Hillel. And the Gemara asks, from where are these matters derived? What is the source of the law of the joining of cooked foods and of the law that one who failed to prepare such an Erev may not cook on a festival for Shabbos? And Shmuel said that the source is, as the verse states, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Exodus 20, verse 8, from which he infers, remember it and safeguard it from another day that comes to make it forgotten. When a festival occurs on a Friday, his preoccupation with the festival and the preparation and enjoyment of its meals could lead one to overlook Shabbos. Therefore, the sages instituted an ordinance to ensure that the Sabbath will not be remembered even then. It can't be that Shabbos is an afterthought for the festival. The festival is once a year. You're excited, especially Sukkot, the time of our rejoicing. You might just think, well, I'm going to make a huge meal for all the guests. And the leftovers can be for Shabbos. And, you can do that, but do you really want to have Shabbos leftovers? Maybe you're going to plan that whole meal, and then Friday afternoon be like, oh, wait a minute, I got to make a Sabbath meal. And you're only remembering at that time, too late. But if you were already thinking ahead of time, I'm going to have to cook a Sabbath meal Friday afternoon. I'm going to make my Erev Tavshilin on Wednesday. So now you have the Sabbath in mind, and that's what we need to do to keep it holy. The Gemara asks, what is the reason that the sages instituted this ordinance in particular to ensure that the Sabbath would not be overlooked? Why did they do it this way, this Erev Tavshilin? And Rava said the sages did so in deference to Shabbos, and they instituted an Erev so that one will select a choice portion for Shabbos and the choice portion for the festival. If one fails to prepare a dish specifically for Shabbos before the festival, it could lead to failure to show the appropriate deference to Shabbos. And Rav Ashi stated a similar reason. The sages did so in deference to the festival so that people will say one may not bake on a festival for Shabbos unless he began to bake the day before. All the more so, one may not bake on a festival for a weekday. Right? You may not bake on a festival for a weekday. We're going to skip that. And then, if you're, this year we don't have to deal with that, right? Because this festival is not adjacent to Shabbos. Maybe next Passover, next Sukkot we'll have to. So just remember that when the festival days are adjacent to Shabbos, you're going to need this Erev Tavshilin, and you have to do it before the festival begins. Remember that. You got to do it before the festival begins and say the blessing. So if that situation comes up, remember to look up this law and to say the blessing when you do it and put the food aside and make sure it doesn't get eaten during the festival, etc. We skip a little bit near the bottom of page 15. Since the Baraisa mentions the verse from Nehemiah, which we skipped that section, but now that we're talking about a verse from Nehemiah, the Gemara poses a question. What is the meaning of send portions for him to him for whom nothing is prepared? Nehemiah 8, verse 10. And Rav Chisda said, send to one who does not have food of his own prepared for Shabbos that follows the festival, because he did not prepare an Erev Tavshilin and must therefore rely on others. So somebody should have done this, but he didn't do this. He forgot. But other people did it. Can he somehow join in their Erev Tavshilin, like maybe somebody made it on behalf of the town or the neighborhood or the community or the city? Can he rely on somebody else's Erev Tavshilin for himself to be able to cook on the festival for the needs of Shabbos? And some say that he said the following: it is necessary to provide food for one who did not have an opportunity to prepare a joining of cooked foods on the eve of the festival, but one who had an opportunity to prepare a joining of cooked foods and he did not prepare one is negligent, and there is no obligation to care for him. And the Gemara poses another question with regard to the same verse. What is the meaning of, for the joy of the Lord is your strength? Also from Nehemiah. And Rabbi Yochanan said, in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, the son of Rabbi Shimon, the Holy One, blessed be he, said to the Jewish people, my children, borrow on my account and sanctify the sanctity of the day of Shabbos and the festivals with wine, and trust in me, and I will repay this debt. That's the source for the idea that what you spend on Shabbos, on celebrating Shabbos and celebrating festivals, does not come out of the money that has been decreed that you will make this year. It's decreed on Rosh Hashanah and sealed on Yom Kippur, right? So who will live and who will die, who will prosper and who will be impoverished, etc. Like our livelihood for the coming year is determined by God during those 10 days that just passed between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And we learn that it's sealed on Yom Kippur, but there's still a crack in the gates. So our prayers now during these intermediate days before Sukkot starts and during the whole Sukkot festival, we can still kind of like slip our note under the gates of heaven, as it were. And, sort of soften the decrees, that we should have a better decree for the coming year. But whatever money, whatever livelihood is sort of determined for us by heaven to come, this coming year, what we spend on for Shabbos meals, for the enjoyment of Shabbos, right? We were told to sanctify Shabbos and the seasons and the festivals. And so this is the source for whatever you spend on Shabbos, have better wine, nicer meat, more food, etc. That's not taken out of your livelihood for the year. You spend on those things and somehow more money will come to you this year. And that's where we get that idea. And the Gemara returns to this issue. And Rav Tachlifa, brother of Rav Chozai, taught a person's entire livelihood is allocated to him during the period from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur. It's amazing that page was yesterday's page that fell on Yom Kippur. No accidents, right? And my friend AJ Stern in our little minyan, right? I'm the gabbai, so it's my job to auction off the aliyahs. It's a big fundraising thing for our minyan. And before I started auctioning the aliyahs, he shared this teaching from yesterday's daf. It's amazing. It falls on this day's page. That our entire livelihood is allocated between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. But during that time, as each individual is judged, it is decreed exactly how much money he will earn for all his expenditures of the coming year, except for expenditures for Shabbos and expenditures for festival and expenditures for the school fees of his son's Torah study. In these areas, no exact amount is determined at the beginning of the year. Rather, if he reduced the amount that he spends for these purposes, his income is reduced and he earns that much less money in the year. And if he increased his expenditures in these areas, his income is increased to ensure that he can cover the expense. So, we are largely a Shabbos minyan. We don't have daily minyan there. But most of that money that we raise goes to having a nice kiddush. So we have a nice meal on Shabbos and festivals. And so anyone who contributes toward that, whatever money they contribute to that, their income actually gets increased during the year. And here is that source and that teaching that fell out right on Yom Kippur when we were raising money for that purpose. An amazing thing. We skip down a little more. We're on page 16 near the top. It is taught in a baraisa. They said about Shammai the elder that all his days he would eat in honor of Shabbos. What does this mean? If he found a choice animal, he would say, this is for Shabbos. And if he subsequently found another one choicer than it, he would set aside the second for Shabbos and eat the first. And he would eat the first to leave the better quality animal for Shabbos. which continually rendered his eating an act of honoring Shabbos. Likewise, every day we have a daily psalm that we say in morning prayers. And what do we say about that daily psalm? Do we say this is the Monday psalm, the Tuesday psalm, the Wednesday psalm? We say this. Oh my God, let me turn that off. Sorry. We say that this is the psalm. Whoops. Hang on. This is the psalm for the second day of the week of Shabbos, or this is the psalm for the third day of the week of Shabbos, right? All the days of the week are counting toward Shabbos. And this idea of Shammai was that he was always thinking about Shabbos. And when he found some delicacy, or in his case, I mean, they lived in an agricultural community where you could buy live animals and keep them in your barn. That's not so easy for most of us, right? But, you know, I guess you could freeze meat, but like when you would find a really choice cut of meat, say, this is for Shabbos, and right, put that away and keep it for Shabbos. And then, you know, if you found a better one, okay, so you replace the Shabbos meat with this even better one, and then the one that you were saving, eat it now. But this idea of always thinking about Shabbos, preparing for Shabbos, how can I make my Shabbos table nicer? How can I, you know, treat my guests for Shabbos greater? How inviting guests? Like, we should always have Shabbos on our minds. However, Hillel the elder had a different approach, that all his actions, including those on a weekday, were for the sake of heaven. As it is stated, blessed be the Lord day by day. He bears our burden, our God, who is our salvation. Selah. That's Psalm 68. Meaning that God gives a blessing for each and every day. And that is also taught in a Beitzah in more general terms. Beis Shammai say from the first day of the week, Sunday, start preparing already for your Shabbos. And Beis Hillel say, blessed be the Lord day by day. So I guess Hillel is not thinking about Shabbos all the time. He's just being thankful for every day. Hold on a second. So blessed be the Lord day by day. Rashi and many other commentators explain that Hillel trusted that God would provide food and other items for Shabbos when the time came, and therefore he did not concern himself about this during the week. Others explain that all of Hillel's actions all through the week and with regard to all matters were always undertaken in honor of Shabbos, so that he did not need to announce this explicitly. Okay, so it's not that Beis Hillel was less mindful of Shabbos than Hillel himself was less mindful of Shabbos than Shammai. He always had Shabbos on his mind, according to that view. We continue. Apropos the statements about honoring Shabbos, the Gemara cites another statement on the same topic. Rabbi Chama, the son of Rabbi Hanina, said, one who gives a gift to his friend need not inform him that he has given it to him, and he need not concern himself that the recipient might not realize who gave it to him, as it is stated, and Moses did not know that the skin of his face was radiant. After talking with the Lord, his face was glowing, but he didn't know. So God had given Moses this gift of a glow on his face, right? This unique glow that only Moses ever had, but Moses wasn't even aware of it. Now the Gemara raises an objection to this. Isn't it written, nevertheless, you must keep my Shabboses, for this is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I am the Lord who sanctifies you. Exodus 31:13, which the sages expounded as follows. The Holy One, blessed be he, said to Moses, Moses, I have a good gift in my treasury, and its name is Shabbos, and I wish to give it to the Jewish people. Go and inform them of this intention of mine. And from here, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel said, one who gives a gift of a piece of bread to a child must inform his mother of his actions so that the child's parents will be aware of the giver's fond feelings for the family. So which is it? Do we not have to tell people that we've given them a gift, or we do have to tell them? And the Gemara answers, this is not difficult. This case where one need not inform the recipient is referring to a gift that is likely to be revealed, and they'll realize who gave it to him. Like Moses' shining face, eventually someone will say, hey, your face is shining. Who gave you the shining face? Obviously it was God, so he would know. But when a gift is not likely to be revealed, when you give something to someone and they're not going to know that it came from you, so you should tell them so that they have the opportunity to thank you. Obviously, it's different if you're giving tzedakah, if you're giving to charity, and you want somebody to have what they need, and you want to give anonymously. That is credit worthy. I mean, that's a beautiful thing to do. It's what's the word I'm looking for? It's praiseworthy. It's praiseworthy to give to charity anonymously, but that's different, right? Where you're talking more of a gift of endearment. So if they're going to realize it came from you, it's fine. But if they're not going to realize, you should let them know that it came from you. Skip a little more. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish said, "The Holy One, blessed be He, gives a person an additional soul on Erev Shabbos, the afternoon before Shabbos. At the conclusion of Shabbos, God removes it from him. As it is stated, Exodus 31:17, he ceased from work and was refreshed." Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish expounds the verse as follows: "Since he ceased from work, and now Shabbos has concluded, and his additional soul is removed from him, woe for the additional soul that is lost," vai nefesh, related to vai nafash. In other words, it's a kind of play on words, and that's one of the sources for this idea, but it's definitely a very traditional and important idea in Judaism, that the Sabbath is such a holy and beautiful time that it's not just that we're not permitted to do a bunch of stuff, and it's not just that we're commanded to rest, and it's not just that we're commanded to be besimcha, to enjoy the Sabbath with our loved ones, but even more, and that we're, it's a time of coming closer to God and feeling God's presence in our lives. But on top of all that, what enables us to have that sensitivity and to be refreshed is that this portion of our soul, which even while we're here, it remains in the world of souls, on the Sabbath, it kind of comes down to us. We have an additional measure of soul, right? We are souls, we have bodies, but on Shabbos, our soul is more complete. This portion that comes down from the world of souls, or at least a part of the portion that we left up there, comes to us in this world. And how can I put it? We are more soulful on Shabbos. Near the bottom of the B side of page 16, the Gemara relates with regard to the blind person who presented Mishnayos before Mar Shmuel. The latter observed that he was sad, and Mar Shmuel said to him, "Why are you sad?" And he said, "Because I did not prepare my Erev Tavshilin, the joining of cooked foods before the festival." Mar Shmuel said to him, "Well, then rely on mine." In the following year, this man once again was sad, and Mar Shmuel observed him. He said, "Why are you sad?" He said, "Because I did not prepare a joining of cooked foods." And Mar Shmuel said to him, "If so, you are consistently negligent in this regard. Therefore, for the entire world, anyone else but you, it is permitted to rely on my Erev Tavshilin. They forgot to prepare one. But for you, it is prohibited to do so, as I did not intend to include such negligent people as yourself in my Erev." Now, the commentators will sort of soften the blow, the way that this was stated. Okay, the guy forgot once and then he forgot one more time. But there's this idea that, you can't just rely on being a negligent person like Blanche Dubois and say, "I've always relied on the kindness of strangers," right? A certain number of times, maybe it's only once, maybe it's more than once, you can make the mistake and somebody else could include you in their fix for this. Maybe a bunch of times. But eventually, you're establishing yourself as somebody who's just negligent and is not following the law, and then you can't rely on their kindness, or you're never going to learn the lesson. And so, in a sense, it's tough love so that this guy will remember in the future to make his Erev Tavshilin. We go to page 17 on the A side, and now we're talking about what I was talking about at the top of the show, about how the daily Amidah is adjusted for Shabbos, right? We always have the opening 3 blessings of praise in the central prayer, the Amidah, the Shemona Esrei. On all days, we have the beginning 3 blessings of praise and the final 3 blessings of thanksgiving. On a weekday, we have 13 blessings of supplication in the middle. On Shabbos, we just have 1 blessing in the middle, praising God for giving us Shabbos, right? What happens when Shabbos coincides with a festival day? How do we adjust that central blessing to account for the fact that it is both a festival day and Shabbos? And what does it mean? And I give thanks to Sarah Ronis, who is one of the writers on Daily Dose of Talmud or Daily Dose of Daf Yomi, who wrote on this. And she said, the way that the sages approach this actually reveals some really deep philosophical questions and answers about the sages' approach to Shabbos, festivals, and the relationship between the Jewish people and God. The sages taught the following baraisa. In the case of a festival that occurs on Shabbos, right? So festival meaning not the intermediate days, but in Israel, the first day of Sukkot, or outside Israel, the first 2 days of Sukkot, or the first 2 days of Passover, or the last 2 days of Passover. Or in terms of Sukkot, the last 2 days are not Sukkot anymore, right? The last 2 days, now it's Shmini Atzeret, and that's a 2-day festival outside of Israel, and it also coincides with the second day of its Simchas Torah, but that's its own festival. Okay. But what happens when one of these festivals coincides with Shabbos? So Beis Shammai say one must recite an Amidah prayer that includes 8 blessings. So it'd be the 3 in the beginning, the 3 at the end, and in the middle, 2 blessings. 1 for Shabbos and 1 for the festival. Separate blessings in the middle, and so you'd have 8 blessings total. But Beis Hillel say one must pray an Amidah comprising only 7 blessings, like every Shabbos, i.e. the 3 opening ones, the 3 concluding ones, and 1 in between. This middle blessing, one begins with Shabbos and concludes with Shabbos, and he recites a passage referring to the sanctity of the day of the festival in the middle. And Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, Rebbe, says he even concludes this blessing with mention of both Shabbos and the festival, saying, Blessed are you, Lord our God, rule of the universe, who sanctifies Shabbos, the Jewish people, and the seasons, in that order. Shabbos, the Jewish people, and the festivals. You might think, well, the festivals only come once a year. It would be God who sanctifies the festivals, Shabbos, and the Jewish people. Or maybe it would be Shabbos because it's more important, and then the festivals, and then the Jewish people. So why is it this order? Well, you're going to say, okay, well, people are more important than festivals, but then maybe it should be who blesses the Jewish people, who blesses Israel, Shabbos, and the festivals. But no, Shabbos is more important. So Shabbos is more important than people? What does it mean? Why is it that order? Who sanctifies Shabbos, Israel, and the festive seasons? Why? Atana taught a baraisa before Ravina with a slightly different reading. He concludes the blessings with who sanctifies the Jewish people, Shabbos, and the seasons, in that order. And Ravina said to the Tana, is that to say that the Jewish people sanctify Shabbos? Do the Jewish people sanctify Shabbos? Isn't Shabbos already sanctified from the 6 days of creation? Every 7th day is automatically Shabbos without the need for any declaration on the part of the Jewish people. We might say Kiddush, we might sanctify that day for ourselves to sort of enter the holiness of Shabbos, but Shabbos is going to be holy whether we observe it or not, because God sanctified Shabbos at the beginning of creation. Okay, rather amend it and say who sanctifies Shabbos, the Jewish people, and the seasons, which is the way that it came out. That's the law. As the Jewish people indeed sanctify Rosh Chodesh, the beginnings of months, and the festival days. Rav Yosef said, the law with regard to the conclusion of this blessing is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, and as the difficulty was resolved by Ravina. Why do we do it in that order? God sanctified Shabbos originally. What was the next thing that happened in time? Were there festivals? No, the festivals were created by the Torah. Right? We didn't have Passover, we didn't have Sukkot, we didn't have Shavuos until God gave us the Torah and told us to observe these festivals. What happened in between? God sanctified the Jewish people by giving them the Torah at Mount Sinai. And then he told us to sanctify those days and keep them holy. I mean, they're not holy days for non-Jews. Non-Jews don't observe Passover. They don't observe Sukkot. They don't observe Shavuos, right? And so that's why it makes sense. God sanctified Shabbos. In a sense, Shabbos sanctifies the Jewish people since that preceded it, and now it's inscribed in the Ten Commandments and it's part of the Torah, right? And it's Shabbos that keeps us on track. And that's why we have that old saying, I forget who it was, an Israeli guy who said it, more than the Jews have kept Shabbos, Shabbos has kept the Jews, right? So Shabbos keeps us Jewish, right? And that's why it's so important to observe Shabbos. If you don't observe Shabbos, you so quickly drift away from all the other aspects of Judaism. So Shabbos keeps the Jews, and then the Jews sanctify the festivals, and that's why we do it in that order. Blessed are you, God, who sanctifies Shabbos, Israel, and the festive seasons. The sages taught in the following Beitzah, in the case of Shabbos that occurs on a new moon or on one of the intermediate days of a festival. That's what's going to happen this year. We're going to have Chol HaMoed on Shabbos, one of the intermediate days of Sukkot that are not full festival days. Okay, so there we're going to handle it differently. We're not going to say the festival Amidah and adjust it to include Shabbos, and we'll mention Shabbos first when we include Shabbos. But this year, when it's Shabbos, we're going to actually say the Shabbos Amidah because it's only one of the intermediate days, but we're going to adjust that Amidah a little bit by mentioning that we're in Sukkot since it's one of the intermediate days. So how do we do that? One prays in his usual manner, reciting the 7 blessings of the Amidah, and he recites a passage pertaining to the event of the day, i.e., may there rise and come during the blessing of the temple service known as Ritzeh. And if he did not recite it, he is required to return to the beginning of the Amidah prayer and repeat it, right? So this coming, not this Saturday, tomorrow, but a week from tomorrow when it'll be the middle of Sukkot, you have to, in the first of those final 3 blessings, the temple blessing, include, may there rise, come and be remembered, for a blessing, this time, this day of Sukkot, our festival of our rejoicing, and may it come upon us for good, for blessing, for livelihood, the other things that we'll say, but we include that in the blessings of thanksgiving for the temple service, because of course, when the temple was standing, we celebrated particularly Sukkot in a very beautiful and big way, as we learned so often during our journey through Tractate Sukkah. Okay, so we just did that. Hold on. And Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel and Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka, disagree and say wherever one is required to recite 7 blessings, whether in the evening, morning, or afternoon prayers, he begins the 4th blessing with Shabbat and conclude. We don't have to read that. We've covered it. Okay, and then I'm almost done. I just have 2 short paragraphs, and then I'm coming to questions and comments. I know it's been a long day. The sages taught in a Beitzah, one may not bake bread on one festival day for the next, on the first festival day for the second festival day kept in the diaspora. Now you might think, wait a minute. I understand that I can't cook on a festival day for the next day, which is a weekday, or even if it's Shabbos, because that's different than the festival. But why can't I cook on the first festival day for the second festival day? That's the same festival, isn't it? But as we've learned a bunch of times, why is a 2-day festival kept outside of Israel and only 1 day in Israel? Because in ancient times, when the calendar was determined by witnesses to the moon, the new moon coming before the Sanhedrin, they couldn't get the word on which day was the first day of the month, quickly enough to the other countries that were far away from Israel. No telegraph, no internet telephone, not even a Pony Express. So it just took time for the word to get out there. And because of doubt, they would have a 2-day Yomtov. But even when you have that 2-day Yomtov, you understand that only one of those days is actually Yomtov, and the other one has been made into Yomtov because of uncertainty of which day is the actual day. So those 2 days are different in nature. Even though we observe them the same way, we're not going to cook on one for the other. So one may not bake bread on one festival day for the next. Nevertheless, actually they said the following established law: a woman may fill an entire pot with meat to cook on a festival, although she requires only one piece for that day, and all the remainder will be for the following day. And similarly, a baker may fill an entire barrel with water in order to heat it up, although he requires only a jug of hot water. But with regard to baking, he may bake only that which he requires for the day. But the Beitzah continues, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar said, a woman may fill the entire oven with bread, although she does not intend to use all on that day, because bread bakes well when the oven is full. A full oven has less empty space and is therefore hotter. Consequently, filling the oven with bread serves only to provide bread for the next day, not only to provide bread for the next day, but also to improve the bread that may be eaten on the same day. And Rava said the law is in accordance with Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. So, preparing food on a festival day for the following day, what is the law? One may not cook, bake, or slaughter on a festival day for the following day, even if that day is Shabbos or a festival. This applies also to the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. However, it is permitted to cook an entire pot of meat, even if one needs only a single piece, and one may certainly slaughter an animal if he requires an olive bulk of meat on that day. If he does not need the food for the festival meal, but eats of it anyway, some say that this is an artifice employed to circumvent a prohibition, and therefore that food will be prohibited, whereas others permit it. And the custom is to be lenient, but one who is stringent is praiseworthy. That's the Mishna Berurah. And some maintain that if one employs artifice in order to cook for the next day, it is prohibited to partake of the food, whereas according to others, it is permitted after the fact. Right? And that question is going to come up if you're cooking, for example, on the second day of Yomtov, and you're thinking, well, tonight is going to be Hol HaMoed, an intermediate day of the festival. So can you cook on the second day of Yomtov for a dinner that you're going to eat that night when it's no longer Yom Tov, but it's Hol HaMoed, intermediate day of the festival? You know, one way to approach it is, well, I'm going to make a lot of food, but I'm going to eat some of it for my afternoon meal while it's still Yom Tov. And like, you got to have it for your meal, not just nibble it, you know, where it's artifice. Some people will even allow that with the artifice, as we see. But the better way is to cook a lot of food and then make sure that you eat some of it as your afternoon meal on that Yom Tov, according to the opinion that we just read. Okay, let's go to questions and comments. Christo. Sometimes I wish the Amidah had a Thanksgiving blessing for when Israel had the temple right before or immediately after asking God to restore the temple again. Very nice. Like there was a specific blessing of Thanksgiving. Thank you that we had the temple. Very good, Christo. I like that. And just spiritually speaking, you know, how many of us find ourselves in a situation where we had something and we lost it? And then what do? We're so upset. We're bummed. And it was something that was dear to us, right? And, you know, we mourn its loss, or if it's something that can be restored to us, we pray that it will be restored to us, etc. But how often do we say, thank you, God, that I had the time that I had with that thing, or God forbid, a person who has been taken away, right? That's beautiful. Anything that we lose that's dear to us, if it's, you know, not a life, but something that can be restored, it's perfectly good, praiseworthy even, to pray to God that it'll be restored to us. And a beautiful prayer for lost objects that I learned from Moshe Storch is, dear God, just as I and, you know, let's say you lose your watch, just as I and my watch are both clear and revealed before you, may it be your will that my watch is revealed to me so that I can find it. It's amazing how often that prayer works. But maybe it's lost forever. And then instead of just being bummed, it's okay to be bummed, but maybe part of being bummed should say, well, I enjoyed it while I had it. Thank you, God, for the time that I enjoyed, you know, with that. Very nice. Sharon, if you look at the traditional final meditation after the Amidah, we ask for the temple to be restored in our lifetime. Absolutely. Thank you. And we also say that earlier in the morning prayers after Rabbi Yishmael's 13 principles of elucidating laws from the Torah. may the temple be restored speedily in our times. And why do we ask God to restore the temple to us? So we can serve him in the manner that he commanded us, right? There are so many laws that pertain to the offerings and sacrifices and how to handle the temple, and we can't do any of them because we don't have a temple. We could study those laws, and that is the substitute that we have. But that's why, to our understanding, that when the Messiah comes, the third temple will be built so that we can observe all these laws that we've been keeping, fresh in our minds how to do them, but we just haven't been able to execute those commandments. And finally, Sharon says, I am chanting to myself, forgetting, and it doesn't seem to align with the teaching, Melech al kol haaretz, Mekadesh Yisrael Shabbos, the holiday name, is at the order that was concluded by the rabbis. Yeah, right. So the order that was concluded by the rabbis, right, is that God blesses Shabbos, Israel, and the seasons, right? And we do that in the Kiddush as well. Right, festival Kiddush. So we would say, teaching it and so reading it out loud, Baruch atah Adonai, Mikadesh HaShabbos v'Yisrael v'Chazmanim. Right, that's how we do that. Okay, everybody. That's what I've got for us today. We've caught up. We're on the Daf Yomi schedule with God's help. We'll be together again tomorrow night, Motzi Shabbos, to learn page Chai, page 18, here in Tractate Beitzah. May everybody be blessed with a rejuvenating and refreshing Shabbos, and enjoy that extra measure of your soul, which is granted to you during Shabbos. All the best. And since we're still at the beginning of the year, may you all be inscribed and sealed for a good decree this year. Gemar Hasima Tova. Good Shabbos.